Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the Pluto transit when it is going through your fourth house. The fourth house of home and family and your past, your childhood, your relationship with your mother. Oh my gosh, what is that going to look like? Well, obviously, it will look like something different for every person because we're all coming from different places. Well, I shouldn't say we because I don't think I will have that transit in my lifetime. Not everybody has a Pluto transit in their fourth house in their lifetime. So if you're listening because this is happening to you right now, you have Aquarius in your fourth house, or it will enter some degree of Aquarius within the next few years, perhaps, and you're just listening for that. Or maybe you have it in the third house and you're anticipating it being in the fourth house at some point. You have to understand that you're not going to have certain transits in your lifetime either, unless we begin to have a physical life that extends to, 180 or 200 years or something along those lines. Because Pluto is going to be transiting through Aquarius for 20 plus years. So this is a big deal, to say the least. It's an outer planet. It's a generational planet. So, let's talk about the role of Pluto and then about what the fourth house can represent in your life. So Pluto is, the first phrase that came into my mind is a change agent. But then I said to myself, but isn't that, I don't know, more like Uranus, the sudden changes in somebody's life, a catalyst for change, or some other place, some other transit, some other planet that is doing something. But first of all, we have to look at the fact that Pluto, which is one of the rulers, along with Mars, of Scorpio, rules the eighth house, and that itself is the house of transformation. The eighth house is the house of death, and that is the ultimate form of transformation. But death is one of those words that people can take to mean physical death, when in fact it can be a psychological death. You've probably heard the term ego death. I don't know if that would specifically apply to the eighth house, but probably because it would create some sort of transformation in how a person regarded themselves. And any kind of deep dive into our psyche is connected to the eighth house, therefore to Pluto. Now, Mars, I would not assign to that. So even though Scorpio is also ruled by Mars, I'm really looking at the Pluto influence over Scorpio and over that eighth house. And death, people are afraid of that word because they, assign it to or connect it to physical death. But actually it can be irrevocable change, and it can be transformation that results from that. I said irrevocable change. I meant irrevocable endings. So yeah, another thing that Pluto is about psychological insight. So this can be a facet of this transit in your fourth house, specifically or particularly as it pertains to your past, as it pertains to your childhood, and as it pertains to your mother. Now, I have to say that some people think that some astrologers assign the father to the fourth house. Well, that makes no sense to me unless you had a father that was very nurturing and more of that feminine energy, like maybe it was a stay-at-home father, or a father who was more emotionally available to you and nurturing versus your mother. Maybe even if they both worked, he was cooking, and I know that cooking doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's not, connected to a gender, but it traditionally has been a female role, and plus it is symbolic of nurturing. So unless you had that type of father, I would just say that this was the mother, or this is the mother. And as a lot of people know, not every adult child has a storybook relationship with their mother. And you might be one of those people. It's really annoying when people assume that everyone has this harmonious relationship with their family of origin. And I call the fourth house family of origin, just to avoid the father versus mother kind of thing. And also because our childhoods are so much revolving around our family of origin that the brothers and sisters and aunts, uncles, cousins are actually the third house. So, if you have recently had Pluto in the third, you might be dealing with some of these same issues now with one of your parents, but it started with your brothers and sisters and or aunts, uncles, cousins. It was like getting warmed up for the main event. So you may, be working through some things at this time. The fourth house is your past. It is your physical structure. So it can deal with even like actual real estate matters. And we have to talk about the symbolism of home. Because if you grew up in a very insecure household, for instance, some people grew up where they might have had financial hardship in their family of origin, and so they moved around a lot. Some people may have been in group homes, or they may have been passed around to different relatives, or maybe they were back and forth between a grandmother and a mother, or an aunt and somebody else. And they never had this kind of real connection with roots and home, because they were in this very insecure type of arrangement that can lend itself to having an attitude about the concept of home that is going to be different than the average person. This also applies to somebody who didn't have much material support growing up, is that, people who grow up low income can overemphasize money and become extremely materialistic. And the good side of that is they may really be single-pointed in wanting to better themselves financially, and that can lead to kind of getting out of that cycle of lack. But the downside of it can be an overemphasis on it. So that can certainly be something that you may have overemphasized the importance of a home based upon how you grew up. And if something happens that threatens your ability to hold on to a home, or maybe you've been working to be able to have a home, that can be traumatic. By the way, Pluto can be about trauma too. That can be traumatic because it means so much to you. And yet, the Pluto transit can empower you. That's another thing. Pluto can be about power struggles, but it also can be about organic power. And it can be about what is authentic to you in terms of power, rather than, people who do not feel powerful tend to be very controlling, right? They're not, a person who feels in control of their life, just, a reasonable extent, in control of their emotions, is not going to need or want to lord it over someone and try to control somebody else, whether it's a partner or a child or an employee. They're just not going to have that desire, because they know that the only person they can truly control is themselves. And they are healed enough in terms of any kind of abuse of power that they're not going to go and try to do that. But people who are very controlling, they're very unhealed and they're acting out. And they might unconsciously seek positions of power so that they can do this, or have children so they can do that. But it never goes the way they want it to. So basically, when Pluto comes into your fourth house, you may find that there is some kind of issue, because when you think about it, first of all, because Pluto is such a long-term transit, it's going to stick around this area for a very long period of time. Now, it could very well be that you have something else going on in that particular house as well. Like maybe you have two signs in the fourth house. So it's not that you're going to have it during that like using the example of Aquarius, if Pluto is in Aquarius for 20 years, you may have it only for 10 years or 7 years or something like that. So, but that's still a long time, 7 years, right? So the point is that it is going to stick around this area for a long time, and therefore the effects may be more subtle because over the long time. But it can be, it's good to know about these very powerful transits ahead of time, because you've probably heard about the boiling frog syndrome, where the frog is in this water and the heat is just gradually, turned up and up, and the frog doesn't realize that, they're in this boiling water, because it happens so gradually. So it's very good to know about it ahead of time so that you can work with the energy in as productive and conscious a way as possible. So how can this manifest for you? You may have power struggles with your mother. And this is what I was trying to say about when it first enters that house, where maybe there is a crisis, because there has to be some kind of catalyst for all this stuff. Pluto can be healing. Because it purifies. It takes up it brings out the impurities that are beneath the surface. Kind of like when we draw up poison from a wound, or, venom, from, there's like, different things that you can do that take it out of the system, so that, but, that means that sometimes it's like detox. When you detox, you may feel worse before you feel better, because the poison is coming up to the surface. Our bodies are so, such miracles that toxins store in fat. So when people, for instance, when people start to detox, they may feel like, if they don't know what they're doing, if they don't know that they're detoxing, they may be like, oh my gosh, I feel so nauseous, or I have these headaches. I mean, even something as simple as like caffeine leaving the system very quickly, and the person hasn't had coffee and they don't realize that it's because they're detoxing from it. And so they might think something is wrong when actually their body is doing its job. It's removing something that it doesn't need, that isn't serving it. So the same thing applies for your life as a whole. Relationships that are not functioning properly have to be brought up for review. But you have to know that they're toxic. And sometimes, especially with relatives, we're sold this bill of goods of like, oh, the family is so important, the family structure and blah, 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 not knowing that there are family members that, are not as supportive as a stranger might be, and not as positive, not as, you just don't have a good chemistry, or you don't feel that that person is adding to your life. And so this can apply to any relative. But the other thing, like I was saying, is that Pluto, the progression from the third to the fourth house can be that you're cleaning house when it comes to your relationship with family members. And maybe it does start with siblings in the third house, and then it moves on to your mother or perhaps the father, and it becomes something that you either, I see Pluto because I see Scorpio as extreme. So sometimes maybe it's kind of like either do or die. Either this is going to work or it's not. And some people may realize that they have to kind of just totally break ties completely. And who knows? There might be people who just close the door on their childhood or their past, and it almost is dead to them. I personally think that the energy of Pluto is going to be more introspective from a brutal perspective, meaning that rather than just like burning the past, which in a lot of cases might simply be a form of escape, in a sense, where the person decides that they're just going to reinvent themselves and they're going to pretend that whatever happened before the age of 20 or what have you, their childhood years, their adolescence, that is not part of themselves. And there's actually something that is connected to, I think it's the law of attraction, which talks about that you can reinvent yourself, and they're talking about it from a deeper level than just doing something superficial, that you don't have to have a past or something along those lines. And I wouldn't be able to articulate it very well, but I found that very intriguing, and I do believe that that is possible, and that some people have accomplished that, where it doesn't matter what happened before I don't want to say disown it, but it's like they detach from it to the extent that it's like it no longer is a part of their history in some way. But for the average person, it may be more likely that you are exploring your past. And it depends on what stage of life you are when you have Pluto in the transiting the fourth house. Because, let's say you're 70 years old and you are, you're in this stage of life where, the past is like more more the past is more extensive than your future. So, for some people, it can cause them to live in the past because they're like, well, why should I even have any hopes and wishes? Because I'm saying for people that have a negative outlook, they might say my best days are over with, or everything that I wanted to do, I did. But I was just reading I think it might have been some kind of a news story about a woman, a prominent singer who probably is in her 80s now. And she mentioned that she believes that her father may have sexually abused her. And I think she might have had some kind of memory that came back to her. Now imagine that, because they call that recovered memory because the mind protects itself from trauma, and sometimes it's a very repressed memory and suddenly it gets triggered for whatever reason. There are so many different ways it could get triggered. Now imagine being somebody of that age who knows, she might live to be 100, but still, that still isn't that much time, that she is realizing this about what may have happened to her. That's what Pluto in the fourth house can mean to someone who is much older, is that all of a sudden something comes up for you that is unearthed, and that can, of course, be a Pandora's box, depending on the person's level of healing in general. If the person is totally repressed, and maybe, a person who has had addictions, who hasn't really been able to become emotionally mature because they have been they've had the tendency to escape their pain through some sort of, mind-altering substance. And that in a moment of clarity, they may have had that memory come up for them. But some people, even if they had a repressed memory, they may have really explored their consciousness, their spirituality. And so even some horrible thing like that comes up, they can put it in a context that allows them to accept it. Maybe not appreciate it, but at least they're not totally freaked out by it. So this is what I'm saying. The skeletons in the closet may come up for you if this is something that you experienced, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is how it's going to play out for you. As a matter of fact, you may feel like you had the perfect relationship with your mother and find out that it really wasn't what you thought it was. Because sometimes in very close relationships, everything is fine and dandy until one of the parties decides to do something differently. And then the other person's like, whoa, 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 what's going on here? I didn't sign up for this in our relationship. What are you doing? Why are you changing? Why are you moving away from me? So it's very important that if you are experiencing this transit, that whatever comes up for you in the next, however many years Pluto's going to be in this area, that you are willing to sit with the revelations that come out, and that you're not overly reactive, because it can be very tempting to get disillusioned, to think, Oh my gosh. I thought this was one way, and it turns out it was a different way. My childhood, my life it was a lie. It was a complete lie, which is, being overly dramatic, obviously. If you suffered from abuse at the hands of your mother, or if this is maybe it's a stepmother or a grandmother or somebody who, like a maternal thing, but if it is the father, I mean, like I said, family of origin, if you have suffered at the hands of someone like that, this is going to be a time when the issue of self-empowerment comes into play. And, obviously when we're adults and we're dealing with parents, even if they were abusive, and even if we still feel triggered by that abuse, the dynamics have changed. Unfortunately, some adult children still feel helpless. And so in those cases, you would have to remind yourself, that was then and this is now. I'm no longer a helpless child who is under the thumb of this, abusive parent. And you might have to say it like a mantra if this is something that's very triggering for you. But the point is that all of these transits exist, as far as I'm concerned, to help you to grow. And so if you need to grow when it comes to standing up to an authority figure like that, then that's what you have to do. Now, the 10th house, the opposite house, is officially the house of authority figures, but obviously with the 4th house, we're going to be dealing with possibly the mother, for instance. Well, that is an authority figure too. It's just on the home front. Now, sometimes when a person has grown up being controlled, being abused by someone bigger, older, with more power, it can lead to having a controlling nature yourself. And it's possible, even if you're not trying to be abusive with your family that you have created, that you still have control issues. So I feel like this is something that may come up for you. This is, let me give a shout out to cafeastrology.com, which I have referenced kind of like consulted to do this reading, because they mentioned this type of thing. And what I would say is they were talking about jealousy. I would say that I would put it as, they did use also the word possessiveness, because definitely a parent can be possessive of their children. But I would say that where this can really flare up is during a child's adolescence, when they are starting to want more freedom and stepping into their individuality. If a parent hasn't really kind of healed their own issues surrounding this area of life, they may become, rather dictatorial, and it might not even be like a conscious thing. It might just be seeing how the child is becoming less and less under their sway, and it makes them feel powerless. It makes them feel like, this identity that they carved by being a parent is slipping through their fingers. And so when a parent senses that, they can become more, you could say tyrannical, but definitely very controlling. And that can set up a power play with that teenager, because rebellion is a very commonplace in teenagers. They're trying to find themselves, and because of the way parents feel threatened, sometimes when their children get older, they can both be undergoing transformation through this transition. And that can lead to a parent kind of like trying to hold on for control with their life, but probably not with the consequences that they have intended. It would be much better to, consult any kind of self-help books, maybe family counseling for yourself, to kind of, discuss if you are having power struggles in your household with children. But I would say particularly teenagers, but who knows, maybe it's even younger for whatever reason. And there might be other reasons why that child is acting out or becoming very uncooperative. And you have to learn how to work with them in a way that is not going to exacerbate the situation. So there could be power struggles in the home in general. And in terms of your physical house, the structure of that, you may do like a gut rehab maybe, or something like that, where everything is just kind of torn down to make it much better. But in addition to that, on a psychological level, if, as I stated, there might be for some people, this concept of what, I have to have a home. Maybe you don't have to have a home. Maybe it's not important to make you feel safe. At one time it might have been. Because sometimes a person's in the stage of life where perhaps they are downsizing and they really don't need all that square footage. But they have this kind of image in their mind of what is acceptable. Maybe they would love to live in a tiny home, and yet they are, they always wanted a big home. And so now it's like kind of like these two things that are at odds with one another. So for whatever reason, you can transform your attitude about home, what that means, maybe even family. And if you were someone who said, I'm never going to have children, who knows? Maybe you change your mind. Or I'm never going to adopt. Maybe you change your mind about that. What does it mean to nurture another human being? Do I have to have my DNA replicated in order for me to love a fellow human being or not? So all of these things are, they're personal issues, and everyone has their own evolution that they have to kind of explore. So it's not like there's just this one answer for everybody. But yeah, so I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. And I hope that you enjoyed this. If you would like me to take a look at your chart, I have a natal chart analysis. I have transits. I have a combination, a deep dive reading, which is a special priced reading that allows me to both analyze your charts as well as look at transits for the upcoming 12 months and see what the themes are that are in your life. But it's always good to know what you're working with, because you can have the best transits in the world, and if you're someone who is, self-sabotaging, you're not going to be able to make the most of those. You're going to, shoot yourself in the foot probably. You could be like longing for love in your life, but if you had a healthy partner or potential partner who showed up, would you be able to retain that connection with that person, or would they run for the hills within a matter of time because they knew that you were, you had issues surrounding this area of life? So anyway, you can find out more information at the link below. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye.